All right, Steve, it is awesome to have you with us. Obviously, a ton to dive into, but I want to start just by checking in on you and your family and seeing how you're doing. How is life like in the Kerr house right now?
Well, we are safe and sound. That's the main thing. Everybody's healthy, and we're just following directions. Listening to the experts and trying to make the right decisions and staying quarantined and waiting this thing out.
I've heard you say before that one of your team values as head coach of the Warriors is joy. So I'd love to know, have you found a way to cultivate joy either with your players or your organization or even at home right now?
Well, at home, definitely. We have my wife and I have three kids. We're empty nesters. The kids are all in their 20s, and they're all with us right now, and their significant others. So we've got a house full of people, and we realize how fortunate we are that we're able to just be together, and everyone's healthy and safe, and so we're having dinners together every night. We've had more family dinners this last 5 weeks than we've had in 5 years. So we're enjoying everything with full awareness that people are struggling out there, and so we're also trying to do our part and help others and try. I'm trying to raise money for food banks and restaurants and different COVID relief funds, and we're all just like everybody, just sort of in shock still that this is the way we're living, and a lot of people are really struggling out there.
You mentioned some of the things that you're doing to try and help raise funds and awareness, and I wanted to ask you about the new podcast that you launched with Pete Carroll called Flying Coach. 100% of the proceeds, I believe, go to the Warriors and Seahawks foundations. You're only a couple of episodes in, but I got to tell people who are listening to this right now, if you haven't found it, go find it, listen to it. What's it like hosting a podcast with Pete Carroll?
It's really fun. Pete and I have been friends for about 6 years. I went to him 6 years ago. I had never met him, but I loved watching his teams at USC. They were so full of energy and they played with so much joy. And that was one of the things I wanted for the Warriors. So I went and visited him in Seattle with the Seahawks during training camp. And he was so generous with his time, and he really made an impact on me in terms of my preparation to be a coach. And so we've stayed in touch ever since. And we were talking a few weeks ago and we said, what can we do to try to help? And this is what we came up with. So yeah, we've raised a couple $100,000, all going to food banks and medical supplies, COVID relief funds. And we're trying to raise more, and we're having fun with the podcast too.
It's a fun listen. And I got to ask, you mentioned that he, helped shift your view or your philosophy of coaching. How did he do that? What was it that he said, or what was it about him that allowed you to think about coaching in a different way?
He really helped me crystallize my thoughts. I had spent a couple of years kind of putting together a manifest, how I would coach. And it included a lot of strategy, offensive and defensive strategy, a film library of plays that I liked. But Pete went way beyond that. He asked me, how are you going to coach your team? And I said, what do you mean? He goes, well, the offense and the defense, that stuff, it doesn't really matter that much. It's more about what your players feel every day when they walk into the building. And I hadn't thought of it that way. But when I reminisced about my days playing for Lute Olson, Greg Popovich, Phil Jackson, Lenny Wilkins, all these Hall of Fame coaches, I realized, there's a definite culture that has been built on really strong values in these great programs. But I have to identify what those values are and how I'm going to implement them. And that's what Pete really helped me to organize in my head.
That's awesome stuff. I know he's obviously got a very busy week this week. How closely will you be watching the NFL draft? And have you talked to him a little bit or shared ideas about, the unique draft process that both of you guys are going to have to go through, this kind of virtual pre-draft prep? It's unlike anything else that we've seen, obviously, with the NFL and what you guys will be facing in a couple months with the NBA draft.
First, I can't wait to watch it. I think we're all starved for sports, and so I'm really excited to watch it. Our second podcast, which we did last week, talked a lot about the draft, and so it was really fun to pick his brain about what they were doing to prepare for what is going to be mayhem, because everything is online. He said they normally have upwards of 100 people at their facility. 25 or 30 are directly in the war room, constantly discussing, tossing ideas, taking phone calls. Now they're going to do that exact same thing, but everybody's literally in their own home, connected virtually. And so I don't know about you, but I could very easily like see my Wi-Fi going down and just not knowing what the hell to do at that point. And I mean, how do you stay connected with all these people? And but he assured me that his tech people had been at everybody's house and they had backup plans. And but I can't wait to watch. It's gonna be really interesting.
You just have to imagine there's going to be some things that play out and some storylines that unfold that they'll be doing a documentary about this draft someday down the future. Speaking of documentaries, you've been trending on Twitter the last 24, 48 hours. A lot of people reliving those joyful memories of Jordan and, the Bulls from that 6th NBA championship run that he went on in the late 90s. You were a big part of this documentary that ESPN is doing. I just got to ask you, it's called The Last Dance. What was it like, doing those interviews, sitting down, reliving some of those glory days that you had with MJ?
Yeah, the interview or interviews that I did for the documentary happened about 2 years ago. And it was interesting because there were definitely some questions that I couldn't remember certain details. I mean, it's been 22 years. And so a lot of the stuff I had to sort of reach and dig down deep into my memory bank to remember how things went, and then even watching the first couple of episodes was really fun, just to be reminded of actually what was happening, and then seeing your younger self is kind of a strange dynamic too. But I'm excited about it. It's I remember at the time when Phil told us that the cameras were going to be with us all year. It was a novel concept. People didn't do that kind of stuff back then. And one of the thoughts was, this is going to be really cool to watch, somewhere down the line. And so here we are 22 years later, and it is amazing to look back and to have that kind of access and to see our lives back then and what was happening, what they were talking about, what we were talking about. Kind of crazy, really.
Yeah, we were talking earlier before we started about your kids watching the documentary with you, and I imagine that has to be a pretty cool, special thing for you to share with them. For the younger generation that didn't get to see Michael Jordan actually play in a game, and they've maybe seen highlights and heard about him, how do you describe how transcendent he was? I mean, how do you put into context who MJ is?
It's such a great question, Ashley, because it's you hear the stories and you can read the stats and you can look at the number of rings, and none of it begins to explain his dominance. There was a tangible feeling on the floor every single night that Michael had everybody intimidated, everybody in the arena, the opposing players, the opposing coaches, the officials, his teammates. Like, we were all just subjects, and he was lording over the proceedings. And he was that good, not only physically, but sort of emotionally and spiritually. He just had this edge about him that nobody else in the league had. And he seemed at times just invincible, invulnerable. And that's the way he carried himself, and that's the way he drove our team. And it was not easy. It was not easy at all. But you knew you were going to win. That was the thing.